Great to have with us today, Pat Barker of the Guardians. Pat, how you doing?
I'm wonderful, sir. How are you?
I cannot complain. We were talking about before going on the air that you spent a little time in our neck of the woods down in the Pensacola area.
I did. I was with the Dixie Echoes for a couple of years and loved every minute of it. That is such a great area of the country. It was a great place to have the kids there for a few years. And of course, traveling with the Dixie Echoes was an unbelievable honor. They were about to celebrate 48, 49 years when I joined them. So we had a great time down there. I'd move back in a heartbeat if I could.
Now, where are you from originally?
Oxford, Alabama. It's a little town. Maybe if people know where Birmingham is, we're about 50 miles east of Birmingham, right there on I-20. Lived there until I moved to Pensacola. I mean, I was there for, 35 years, 36 years, and then Pensacola for a couple of years. And then when I joined Mark Trammell, I lived in Gadsden, Alabama, which was just, 30 miles from Oxford. So I was back home. And then a few years ago, moved just outside of Atlanta, Georgia.
Oxford is where Chakalaka Park is.
It is. And you have to be somewhere from there because no one says Chakalaka correctly. It's always Chocolalaka, or we have the weirdest. We have Wedowie, which
Yeah.
people say Weedawee. And then we have Eastaboga, which God help Siri whenever she tries to say Eastaboga. It does not turn out well. So we've got a lot of weird names up there. So congrats. You said Chakalaka like a native.
Hey, I actually live in the lower part of Alabama, so I'm a little familiar. And plus, we
You're
do
there.
sports, so I'm very familiar with
I got you.
Chakalaka. Let's talk about the Guardians and you becoming a member of the Guardians in 2018. They are a very successful trio in 18 and the fourth part. Is there more pressure on you with the addition of that part to the group, or less pressure because you're not necessarily filling, I guess, some shoes that were already there, or is it no pressure?
Well, no pressure because I had already set a standard of ruining some really good trios. So honestly, all the pressure was gone. They knew what to expect. It wasn't going to turn out well. No, Mark Trammell was a trio.
That's
And
right.
then I was the first bass singer for them. And then when I lived in Oxford, I sang with a group called the Crystal River Boys. And they were a trio before I joined them. Trios, there's too many of them. So I believe that's the ministry God has given me, is just to destroy trios completely. And I've sung with the Booth Brothers, but it hasn't been long enough for me to knock them out.
To tear them up. Okay.
You know what? They took away any pressure there could have been because, it was a great situation. I sang with them 5 years ago at a couple of quartet events because they had been a quartet for a long time. And then when John Rowsey came on, Neil Uhrig's dad had retired. He was the bass singer for all of those years. So they were a trio for just a couple of years, but they had still been booked at a couple of quartet dates. So they asked me to come on board. And so I would sing with them 7, 8, 9 times a year there for a few years. So I really got to know them. I got to be on the bus a little bit. We kind of got to feel each other out. And is this going to be a good fit? So when they asked me 2 years ago to come on full time, it was really an easy call because I had gotten to love those men and know them and felt very comfortable with them. So they took away any pressure that there could have been in the beginning.
I probably need to check the phrasing in this question. It's not what were they thinking? It's what was the thinking?
No, you phrased it correctly. Trust me, a lot of gospel fans were saying the exact same thing. I think they just wanted that quartet sound again. We got along so well. We enjoyed each other so much. They had said, they would not be a quartet again. I mean, that was just something they had decided. But when I came on board and the chemistry is just right, and that doesn't happen all the time, where the chemistry is just perfect between everybody. And we're talking about a sound man, a video man, bus driver, the group, their families. Every one of us love each other, get along, pray for each other. There's not a day goes by that a group text does not come into my phone where everybody's just sending out wishes and prayers. And We've vacationed together. I mean, it's just one of those situations that was perfect. So I think they were just thinking, this may be a lot of fun if we just bring him on full time and let's just see what happens.
Who makes the bigger adaptation when you change from trio to quartet? Is it you as the fourth part, or do the other three parts have to make changes, or are there changes?
Really, I don't believe they changed much because John Rousey pretty well does everything musically for the group. So he writes 95% of the songs that we sing. He arranges all the vocals and has done that for years. And John has a mind and a musical brain where it's not going to throw him to do anything. God has created him for this. And so it was very simple for me to step in there. He put my part in just right. He knows everybody's strengths, and he can build around that. So for another group, it might have been more difficult, but because John Rousey is there, it's extremely simple. For us, I don't know how it's a lot more work for him, but for us, it's very easy.
It is interesting to me, though, that you mentioned that the group is a group even beyond the stage. I mean, you spend an enormous amount of time together. Isn't that kind of unusual? I was reading an article on Chicago, the group that has been together about 50 years in pop music, and they were like, hey, when we split, that's it. We're not going to contact each other. I mean, so obviously to have that chemistry that goes beyond the stage is sometimes rare.
It is rare. I don't know if it's as rare in gospel music. I have lots of friends, and they're in constant contact with each other. Their families get together. So I don't know if in gospel music it's that rare because it really is a family. The most rare thing is for me to be able to see my gospel music peers. That is rare because people think, oh, you must love being with all of those groups and all of your friends. And 85% of the time, the groups are usually just by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So it really helps when you get along because you don't have all those other people in there. But I love it when we do multiple group dates and we can all come together and we're backstage and we're laughing and we're just having a ball. We're going out to eat afterwards. We're trying to get together as much as we can. So I would imagine in the pop world, country world, it is pretty rare. But in gospel music, thankfully, there's a lot of folks who just love to be together.
I don't know if anybody has said this to you, but for me personally, for some reason, and I'm not saying the Guardians have certainly got their own identity, but to me too, they kind of feel a cathedral's void. It's kind of like the Guardians are the cathedrals to a certain degree. I mean, have you heard that before? Is that fair?
That is not fair. I've heard that. Okay, so I have heard that. But I believe there are other groups out there who fill the void better. But I wouldn't say that on anybody. I just felt like the cathedrals, for me, as for me, I know a lot of people would say the Statesmen, a lot would say the Blackwoods or the other groups. For me, it was the cathedrals because I just felt like that was the one group who did everything perfect. And that is not the Guardians. And we would be the first to admit that. We make mistakes, we learn from them. We're constantly trying to see what the crowd loves. And it felt like the cathedrals could do that every night, no matter where they were. And I saw them a bunch of times. They just always had the crowd right there. And so I take it as a compliment. Absolutely. Fair? No, not at all. I don't think no one should have that put on them. I just felt like the cathedrals were just the greatest.
Who has musically been some of the greatest influences on you personally?
I'll go outside the genre first. It'll be a surprise answer for some who don't know me, but honestly, Barbara Streisand was a huge influence on me very early. And I listened to classical music when I was a kid. That was what I really loved for whatever reason. I just thought it was fantastic. So I'm 6, 7, 8 years old, and that's what I listened to. I started taking piano lessons because I loved listening to that kind of music when I was a kid. But my mom had a bunch of Streisand albums. She had the Christmas album we'd play every Christmas. So when I think of people I heard early on and tried to imitate, copy, It would be people like Streisand, Karen Carpenter, um, Sinatra, Tony
Mm-hmm.
Bennett. Those kind of folks were who we heard in our house. But Daddy loved Blackwood Brothers, Statesman. But I did not catch on to them until my early teen years. So really, I had to kind of, I was behind the curve a little bit. So once it became gospel music, it was Rusty Goodman, Rex Nealon, George Yonts was my biggest influence. So I would, and then later on, I still listen to people who influence me. I'm 46, 47. I just had a birthday, so I keep forgetting. I keep getting older. But I still listen to people who influence me. I listen to Phelps. I listen to Gaither. I think Bill Gaither is one of the most underrated communicators in gospel music. That guy, I mean, he can take a song and just rip your heart out or make you smile. So I've got Gaither solo CD. I'll listen to that. So I got a lot of influences, and I think that's how it should be. I don't think you should just listen to one person, because then you just kind of become a karaoke machine, singing like they sing. But mom and dad raised me on a lot of different music, and I'm thankful for it.
You and my wife would get along. She's a big Streisand fan, and
And an Alabama
an
fan. So,
Alabama fan.
yes,
Yeah.
we could go to a Bama game listening to Streisand records. That would be fantastic.
Uh, all right, the new music from the Guardians. Tell us about the song, which is kind of, it says it's a medley of songs, which I
It
guess it
is.
kind of is.
Yeah. What we did was, when I was with the Dixie Echoes, that's when Randy Shelnut said, "Do you know how big is God?" We were actually in Missouri. We were at Silver Dollar City. We had 4 shows a day, 4 days. I had just been with them a couple of months, and really all I knew as a solo was like, "Who am I?" A couple other songs. And when you've got 16 shows in 4 days, "Who am I?" is not going to you're not going to be able to pull that off every program. So we're sitting around the piano during one of the breaks, and we learned the first verse and the chorus of How Big Is God. We sang it, and the crowd enjoyed it. So we just kept doing it like that. So it was just the one verse, chorus, repeat the chorus, and the thing was over in about 2 minutes. But I had done it like that for 10 years or more. So Dean said, "What do we think about maybe putting together a medley where we could kind of span the generations a little bit?" Because he wanted young people to hear How Big Is God. And so he went to John Rowsey, and John, of course, just being brilliant, he really is. He put together the How Big Is God, and then right in the middle, he puts How Great Is Our God, a wonderful new praise chorus. And then, of course, closes it out with How Great Thou Art. And then we took that medley to Wayne Hahn, and Wayne kind of went back to one of his heroes, Larry Goss, and put in some of those great Goss orchestrations and chords and just made it fresh and new. And John, of course, putting together the vocals. And so when we heard it, I loved it. I just thought it was fantastic. I thought John just, hit the nail on the head. I was shocked when they put it to radio. I said, I just don't think that's a great idea. I'm just being honest. We all have say in the group,
Mm-hmm.
which is another thing that's a little different. We all can help make choices. And everyone said, let's release it. I said, I just don't think that's a great idea. But over the last month, I've gotten texts, calls. DJs have called me, listeners have called me, and they love it. I'm shocked that people will sit and listen to me sing for 4.5 minutes. There's no way I would do that. But I think it's the message. I think it's the fact that in the day we live in, it is a great reminder that we serve a God bigger than anything that could come our way. And so I think people are enjoying just that fresh reminder of how big God can be in their life personally.
Was the original thought for the song, or from the standpoint of it being a part of the Guardians' music and eventually winding up as part of a project and then to radio, did it start with you? I mean, did they?
No, sir. It never starts with me. I I always make jokes that I'd rather hear myself sing than anybody else. That's an old George joke. But that is absolutely the opposite. I'm not that big a fan of my voice. So no, I'm never going to come in and say, "Hey, what about featuring me?" They asked me when I first sang with them that 5 years ago at one of the quartet events. It was really the only solo I could do. So they just said, "Do How Big Is God?" It was the song that Dean heard me sing at quartet convention. He went into the hall to see who it was. He was not familiar with me. And so he kind of had a heart for that song. He loved it. So he was the one who asked me if I'd sing it for that quartet event. And then we just sang it every time because it was really about the only feature that I would have. So when I came on board full time, that's when he had the idea to put together the medley. And then, of course, he gave it to John, and then it went from there.
How did they win you over in releasing it to radio? You were opposed to it to begin with, so.
They didn't win me over. I said no all the way to the end. And
They just won.
I got a group text, and it said, "Hey, we just released How Big It Got to radio." And I just put my phone down and went and grabbed a Pop-Tart, trying to make myself feel better. So it really, I was not won over. Seriously, I was not won over till a couple of weeks ago when messages started coming in. And I was thankful that the message was getting out there. I don't care who gives the message. I love gospel radio. I love the groups. I love the message. And when I see somebody else hit number one, or I see somebody really successful, man, I'm going to be the first one just cheering them on, because it is the message that matters. Nothing else matters. And so that's why I think traditional gospel music is so important, because even though there's great gospel music out there, sometimes the message gets hidden in a lot of the music that's put behind it, or a lot of the theatrics or lights and smoke and all that. And I have no problem with it. God bless them. They're reaching somebody I don't reach. But I think traditional gospel music is so important because the message stands out front above everything else.
Before we go, I do want to find out about the personnel change. You have had a change in personnel there with the Guardians. Tell us about it.
Very exciting. I love Neil. Neil Uhrig has become one of my dear friends, and he has been with the Guardians since before it was the Guardians. I mean, it started out as the Uhrig brothers, and he was with the Uhrig brothers for years, and then it became the Guardians, and he was with them for all of those years. And so it was time for Neil to come off the road. His dad was in a facility, and he was really having to work very hard at home to help his dad. His dad passed away just a couple of weeks ago, so you can pray for Neil and his family. But also, it was just time to go home, enjoy the grandkids. And now I will say this, about a month ago, he said, if I knew the schedule was going to be this easy, I'd have just stayed. We haven't sung since February the 9th. And so
Wow.
he called Dean and he said, boy, if I knew we were going to be, at home the whole time, I'd have just stayed. But we looked and we found an incredible voice, and he's been with a few groups that people would be familiar with, but Scott Mullins has joined us. Scott is from West Virginia, and I love Scott. We get along great. Scott has come in, and I mean, he fits like a glove. He's got a beautiful voice, fantastic on stage, great with the people. The people have loved him in those couple of months that we traveled there at the beginning of the year. And he's just, I mean, people are going to fall in love with him, and he's great on the bus. His family is just some of the nicest people in the world. So those who know Scott Mullins, they're not surprised by any of this. They know this already. But for those of you who are going to meet him in the future, and I'm hoping to maybe do some Facebook stuff to where people can get to know Scott here in the next few weeks. We just came out of the studio working on brand new music. We were there with Wayne Hahn, Gordon Moat, Jason Webb, all the great players. It's going to be a great project. Scott's got several features on there that people are just going to absolutely love. So I can't wait for us to get back on the road. But my main reason is so people can meet Scott. They're going to love Scott Mullins.
Hey, we love the music of the Guardians. Thank you so much for chatting with us today.
It was a pleasure.
We want to see you back on the road. I don't know, what is it, July right now, I guess, before you get there.
July 17th is our first date, and we only have 2 dates in July. The rest of July canceled. We've had a couple in August that have canceled. And I saw on Facebook today, Susan Wisnett posted that a full week of dates in September had just canceled. So pray for the groups out there, guys. I mean, bus payments do not stop. Insurance does not stop. Salaries, all of those things that are having to be taken care of, they don't stop. Pray for the guys that are doing radio, the ladies doing radio. Uh, that none of that stops. The bills don't stop. So we've got to pray for our gospel music friends and help them any time we can.
Indeed. Pat Barker of the Guardians, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks. It was a pleasure.